another episode of Sheephoria. We are so excited to be here. We have been talking wellness, and last week we talked a lot about the body and taking care of yourself physically, but we want to go ahead and segue and taking care of yourself mentally as well. And I am excited about who we have on this week.
So am I, girl. This is one of our homegirls from when we were actually growing up. Actually, she wasn't a homegirl because we were much younger than her at that age, but I remember being very young and seeing her as a cheerleader and just being like this black beauty, this teenage black beauty. Yeah, like she had the perfectly proportioned body. And so I'm just so excited to be able to kind of have this or experience this nostalgic feeling of interviewing someone.
And I'm excited to chat with her and see what she's been doing. I mean, gosh, we haven't talked to her in 15 years? But before we get started, I want to remind you guys to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Instagram at Sheephoria. You can also find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Play, Pandora, all of your favorite streaming platforms.
Everything, everywhere, all the time. All right. Are we ready to go ahead and bring her in?
I think so. Let's go ahead and bring her on in.
For that wonderful introduction. I am very humbled and appreciative of being able to share this platform with you guys. And thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Melodie. I wanted to, as I spoke about in your introduction, that you were someone that I looked up to, even though you probably never knew it when I was a little girl, for different reasons. And for some of those reasons we will get into today. But before we get started, I think it's always important that we ground our listeners in who we've got on this call. And so before we get going, you all will see in her background that we have to put some respect on her name for her accomplishments and for who she is in the world of mental health. And so we're speaking with Melodie Simmons, who is currently the clinical director of Core Recovery in North Phoenix, Arizona. And there are a few other titles that she has that she will share with us as we get going today. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Melodie, to just give us a little bit of who you are, where you come from, and then we'll jump into today's episode.
Sure. So my name is Melodie Simmons. My pronouns are she and her, and I currently reside in North Phoenix. And I live here with my husband. We've been together for 11 years this year. So that's huge, right? Because a lot, like that's a third of my life. I'm 33. And so 11 years is a significant amount of time. And it's been wonderful. You know, I mean, it hasn't always been, of course, rainbows and sunshine, but we're in this life together. And with that, I'm also a mom. We have 3 beautiful boys. Our oldest is 6 and our youngest are 3. We have twins, and they're fraternal twins, and they're 3 years old. And so with that, I'm a mom, I am a wife, and I'm also a leader. And I leave that open because I serve the mental health community as a director of clinical services. And I want to have you all understand a little bit more about what that means and what that is. And so I'm working in North Phoenix as a clinical director for a boutique inpatient, residential, partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient program level of care. And so really what that means is just a step down. And I get the opportunity and the pleasure to guide clinicians, to train clinicians at the associate level, to really be great and really to reach their full potential for independent licensure. I also have the opportunity to really grow and develop programs. And so that's what I'm doing today professionally.
Like I said,
let's go, girl. Come on, Black love. Come on, working in the mental health field. I love it. But I want to take it back. So before you moved into mental health, I know you were a model, right? So tell us a little bit about that, how you got started in the transition.
Sure. So modeling really is something that I never pursued actively. So I'm 5'10" and a half, so I'm on the taller side. And growing up in Fairbanks, Alaska, there really isn't a market for modeling professionally, for acting professionally. And so here and there, I would hear, oh, you should model, you should act, but I never really thought anything about it. I never took it a step further. And so really it wasn't until after I got my graduate degree did I pursue this. And I say that because I spent a lot of time as a professional in the eating disorder world space. And I was asked to model back in 2010. I was approached by a talent agent. And she had asked me if I would be interested in modeling, if I would want to come to her agency. I did my online research and I ended up joining. But that wasn't always my journey. And I really want to talk about that because I think that oftentimes people think that, oh, you're tall, you're what society views as beautiful, this would be a great industry for you. But along came that was some struggles. And I really want to talk about that. And so I remember in high school, I was a cheerleader. And I remember I dated like the quarterback. So we were very stereotypical. And at the time, I guess we had a good, right?
Yes.
I remember that.
I do. I remember going to the basketball games because I was a young Cooper in the making. And I was supposed to be watching the games, but I would just be watching like Melodie, like with the star male athlete on
flawless, just all the time, flawless.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you. And you know what? I think a lot of that took work because that's definitely not how I felt internally. And what I really appreciate with this talk is really just about kind of the facade that we put out as women, as we portray, and sometimes we have to pretend to be something that maybe we're not. And so that was a lot of just my upbringing. That was a lot of my like high school experience. I feel like now at a place where I am in my career and my life, I feel like I don't have to put up that facade anymore. And so I want to kind of take it back when I was in high school, when I knew you guys and I was a cheerleader and I was dating that, quarterback, very stereotypical. But I remember the cheerleading captain, who's actually one of my best friends at the time, she had told me, she had said, Melodie, you're really thin, but you have really big legs. And why is it that your legs are so big? And to be completely transparent, that is something that I struggle with now at 33 years old, decades later, is just that message that I have about myself and my legs, right? And just those messages that we receive. And so while I put on this very confident person, right? I was really kind of struggling with myself internally and thinking, oh, wow, my legs are larger than maybe, my counterparts. And maybe I do need to tone them more. And I found my way later in life really wanting to hone in on that eating disorder community, that body image community, and really provide a service for African Americans because of that marginalized community. It's oftentimes really missed. And it's not only missed in the mental health world, but also in the medical world as well. And so really with my modeling journey, it was not something that I sought out. And oftentimes I would say that I had that voice in my head about not having the body image to be a model. And so it was never something that I actively pursued. But after I finished my master's degree in 2010, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And I moved to Nashville, Tennessee because my intention was to attend Vanderbilt University for an advanced practice nursing degree, which I did do. And so I'm kind of in the interim between master's degrees. I went to Vanderbilt, but there was a year gap where I was really just kind of a working professional. And that's where I took that time and really was approached by an agent. And I did my research, saw that she represented the commercial, the high fashion, the runway, and the lifestyle. Those are different types of forms of modeling. She really just kind of did it all. And so I thought, oh, well, that's kind of neat. She approached me in the conditioner section. And so at that time, I was going natural. I still am natural here today. And I was just trying to find a really good conditioner, to be honest, right? And so I was in Target, and I remember I was like on the lowest shelf, and I was looking through the different conditioners, and she came to me and she said, hey, have you ever considered modeling? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, here's my card. Look at my website, and if you're interested, shoot me an email. I'd love to get you in the studio and interview you. And I thought, okay, sure. At that time, I was kind of in a transition point in my life and my career. So I just finished. So originally from Fairbanks, Alaska, got my undergraduate from the University of Alaska, and moved to Mississippi for my graduate experience for my master's degree. Kind of some stories in between. I went to Jackson State University, which is a historically Black college and university in Jackson, Mississippi. I did that my junior year, where I was afforded the opportunity to do a national student exchange program. So kind of backtracking, stay with me, guys. I'm gonna go back full circle. But I had the opportunity to attend a historically Black college and university. And that was really important to me at the time, because having been born and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska, sometimes some of the military kids would come into Alaska and they would say things like, Melodie wants to be white, or Melodie doesn't know who she is, she doesn't know her roots. And I thought, you know what, let me see what this Black experience is that I'm missing, right? So I went to Jackson State University, and I did have the opportunity to pledge the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so I am a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated with our current VP, officially, I guess, the 20th. She is also a member of my sorority. So that's very exciting, very powerful. Met my sorority sisters. My line name is Eskimo. We are the That's a whole other podcast. I am an active member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Very proud of that. And so, kind of backtracking, I went to Jackson State University my junior year to get this experience, this Black experience that I was supposedly missing. And so, in that experience in Jackson, Mississippi, I was approached by different random people. I don't know if they were agents or not, because I didn't take the time and space to listen to their spiel, but I did get approached with modeling. And I think that is because I am 5'10" and a half. I'm taller, I have a more thinner built. And so I think that's why I was approached, but I never pursued it because my family really promoted education. And so with that, kind of going back full circle, graduated from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. That was part of the National Student Exchange Program. And I told myself that after I finished my master's degree, if I'm still approached about modeling, maybe that's something that I would dive into. And so ended up in Mississippi College, which is a private Christian university in Clinton, Mississippi. Got my master's degree there, had connections just through Jackson. Clinton is a suburb of Jackson, Mississippi. So still had my connections, still had my line sisters, still had my sorority sisters. Wanting to get back to Mississippi just to be with my people, right? Like the people that I really connected with. So I went to Jackson State University for my junior year, went to Mississippi College for my graduate experience, and finished that program. So after I finished that program, what I noticed was just the health disparities between the counseling and the nurse practitioner, and really wanting to bridge the gap. And so at that time, I found the need for innovation. And I found the need to bridge that disconnect between the psychiatric medication prescribers and their mental health therapist. And so at the time, in 2010, I graduated with my Master's of Science in Mental Health Counseling from Mississippi College, but wanted to do more. wanted to provide that medication management for my patients. And what I had seen at that time was that my patients were seeing their medication prescriber maybe once a month for 15 minutes. And then I was doing the work with them. I was doing the counseling with them, that real, profound core issues work, and really wanting to bridge that connection. And so at that time, I did some research and found some different universities that offered a psychiatric nurse practitioner program. And that's where I really fell into Vanderbilt University. My sister was I think she was a second-year master's student at Belmont University, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I thought, I could move to Nashville, attend Vanderbilt University, granted that I get in because it's a very competitive program, and I could do both. And so I've always been an innovative leader. And so fortunately, I did get accepted to their advanced practice psychiatric standing program, and did do their nurse practitioner program, but only to a point. And only to a point, I say, is because I finished the first year, and then the second year was more into the nurse practitioner realm of prescribing. And back in 2010, the world really wasn't interested into medication prescribers really having that holistic mind, body, spirit approach. It was just more focusing on that med management piece and just seeing your patients in for 15 minutes once a month, doing that med check and then sending them on. Right. And so at that time I thought, you know what, this isn't for me, because I already have a master's degree in counseling. Counseling is what I love. It's my passion. And providing that medication piece will only serve them in so far. I'm only seeing them once a month for 15 minutes. I'm greater than this. I can do more. And so at that time, I decided to put that program on pause. And then I decided to then explore my first master's degree in mental health counseling. And that's how I ended up in Phoenix, Arizona. I started off at Banner Health University and worked in Scottsdale, doing triage, actually, determining level of care for patients that would come in, working closely with our psychiatrist there, and determining if they need to go inpatient or if they could get referrals as outpatient. And so really since then, moved to Arizona, and I think that I've only really blossomed from there. Spent a lot of years within the Banner system. The Banner system allowed me to really explore the intensive outpatient program level of care, the consultation level of care in the ERs and on the medical floor. And that really kind of sparked my interest into a leadership opportunity, which really started off in 2016 and then really took off in 2018 when I landed my first job as a director of a world-renowned eating disorder facility in Wickenburg, Arizona.
Wow, Melodie. There's such a path forward that I am seeing that you have taken, being a woman of color, moving into leadership. And it's not always as straightforward as, right, like we may have grown up thinking it was going to be. And very clearly I can see that you have gone down paths that maybe were prescribed for you, or as you've gone down those paths have realized this actually isn't for me. I'm going to go this way and try this way out. And just the process of elimination, so to speak. And I really admire, as you've been sharing with us, just your journey to finding what is really your thing and what you feel like your brand and your passion and your desire is in your field. And I think that's so important, because I think often as women of color, we can get taglined as the strong, resilient one who will press through whatever to get the job done. And so I just am admiring, I want you to know that I'm admiring and listening to kind of your journey of how you've gotten to where you are as being a clinical director. I admire that you have kind of sussed out things that weren't for you. And so I want to ask you a little more. We were talking a little bit before this episode. Something that really stuck out to me personally was your conversation around Black women and eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to hear your spin and your take on that, and take us away.
Yeah, I think that is a conversation that needs to be had more often than not. And I think that not only from psychiatric providers, but also from medical providers, because it is lost in culture. And I say it's lost in culture because oftentimes African Americans, with our diet choices, with our cultural foods, with our social gatherings, and everything centers around food. And oftentimes, unfortunately, African Americans are kind of put in a box of kind of being labeled as, maybe that you're lazy, or maybe that you just are poor, or maybe you just make poor choices. And that's definitely not the case. Just from what I've seen, from what the research has suggested, I'm hoping that in the next coming years, there's more research with the African American community, particularly around eating disorders, but just our diet in general and what we've been eating just as African Americans. A lot of deep fried food, a lot of high fat food. A lot of that kind of goes back to that slave mentality and that culture that we have. And so it's also educating and learning to educate our African American community on whole foods and eating clean, and not everything being that deep fried, and how can we provide maybe the seasoning that we like on our chicken and on our meat, but without the high sodium. And so it's really an education that needs to be had among our community. And that was really my interest with eating disorders, because for whatever reason, I've always had an interest in eating disorders. And I think that it started early on in my own personal experience, being that cheerleader and getting a message from my cheerleading captain that like my legs were too big, according to my body size. But I'm also African American, and just historically, for me and my family, we carry our weight more in the lower half. And so I will have the bigger hips and the bigger thighs than maybe some of my Caucasian counterparts. And so I think that with my own personal experience of dealing with kind of body image and diet, that has changed my mentality about what I need and what my body needs. And I think that what's lacking in society is those conversations. Oftentimes it's just an assumption. They don't even explore what people's eating disorders are, what their disordered eating looks like, habits. They just assume, oh, you're African American, you must eat a lot of fried food, you must eat a lot of like deep fat, and you just need to change your diet, without kind of doing a deeper dive into maybe exploring what does your diet look like, and how many meals and snacks that are you eating a day.
Yeah, I think about that. That takes me back to when I was in Tulsa. And I think part of this is like having grown up in Fairbanks, Alaska, being so sheltered. I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I remember when Hurricane Katrina happened, I vividly remember asking my mom, well, all you saw on the news were like Black people, right? Like who were stranded or who were poor and in shelters and things like that and needing help. That was all they were broadcasting on the news. And I vividly remember asking my mom, well, why don't they just go apply for like jobs? Or why don't they just go get a job? Then they won't be poor anymore, right? And obviously, like as I matured and grew up, I understood that poverty was a real thing for people, and a struggle, and generational poverty, and right, like those obstacles that oftentimes it's people of color, that are, they're having, or marginalized populations who are having to overcome these barriers and obstacles, and are oftentimes very resilient populations, but are not cast in that light. And I remember being in Tulsa at one of my teaching locations, serving a population where they were in a food desert, right? And I couldn't when I first got there, I was like, why are these kids bringing honey buns and Takis and like, don't their parents, and candy for snacks, right? Don't their parents know this isn't healthy for them? And when you were talking about the stereotypes that are placed on Black women or Black people in general for their weight or their lack thereof of healthy decisions as far as what they put into their body, right? We have to think of and incorporate variables such as poverty or being in the midst of a food desert when the nearest Walmart, which might be the healthiest option for you, is 15, 16 miles away, right? And then we're thinking about gas to get to those locations. And so I just think it's amazing that you are diving into that aspect, because even in our preparation, as Courtney and I were talking, our preparation for this episode, it struck me to hear that eating disorders for women of color were something that were on your agenda, or, you know, on your horizon for diving into.
Yes, that I definitely want to talk about just the food disparity and the binge eating disorder and the prevalence in the African American community. Just like you said, Christina, during Hurricane Katrina, we did have that food disparity complex. You know, do I need to load up on these honey buns, you know, that are filled with preservatives that can last me and that can sustain me, you know, for several months, if not years? And so I think that that's oftentimes what is kind of in the forefront of the African American community mind, is also this food disparity. And am I going to have enough? And to even like enhance that even with COVID. And so kind of weird, I'm probably the unicorn of the bunch. And so with COVID, I definitely have really capitalized on my Instacart. And I have not been into a grocery store personally since like February, March. Granted, I do have a family of 5, and so it's hot in Arizona, so it's really a pain to load up your own groceries, right? But I really just capitalized on Instacart. And with that, when I'm texting my shopper, she'll send me pictures of, you know, the different shelves and say like, Melodie, it's empty. There's nothing here. You know, they don't have maybe that steak that you were looking for, or that asparagus that you were looking for. Like, it's completely empty. And so what COVID particularly, and similar to Katrina, has shown us is that food insecurity, and that definitely enhances those binge eating disorder behaviors, and that I need to hoard my food because I don't know when I'm going to get this. And so that's very scary and very dangerous about COVID, similar to Katrina, is that we do have an increase of binge eating disorders because of that food insecurity kind of thought that is very real.
So Melodie, I have a question. You've just mentioned little things. We were talking about when we were kids and you were a cheerleader, and we were just like, oh my God, she's beautiful and she's dating this quarterback. And you were saying that you didn't always feel like this amazing person that we put on this pedestal. And then you also talked about the prevalence of eating disorders in the African American culture, but it's not a conversation that we're having. Why do you think, with the African American culture in particular, why aren't we having those tough conversations?
I think probably because, unfortunately, there are a lot of secrets, right, within the African American community. There's a lot of mistrust, just generally speaking, of people, and then keeping your stuff in-house. And so I'll be very vulnerable at this point. And I did get the COVID vaccine. I got my first round of vaccine. It's the Pfizer vaccine. I did get that on the 31st. But with that, there is a lot of mistrust, and just mistrust in science and in government, just from the Tuskegee studies that they did, relatively recent. And so I get that. But I think that there's just a lot of secrets in the African American community. And one thing that we say in eating disorders, and I've just adapted in my life, is that secrets keep you sick. And so I think that we're really doing ourselves as a community a disservice of keeping these kinds of feelings and emotions and thoughts that we have secret, because in reality, they're keeping us sick. They're keeping us only progressing insofar.
So from a clinical perspective, what would you say to someone who has been through things to where I'm going to mistrust you because I haven't had or haven't been in a situation where I can trust others? What would you say to the African American who the first thing they bring up is the Tuskegee experiment? They'll bring up, well, when you turn on the TV, it's just a Black person on TV. What do you say to someone who has this distress? Like, how can we change our perspective?
I would say definitely getting out of your comfort zone, because when you're in your comfort zone, you're not growing, right? You're kind of staying stagnant, you're staying comfortable. And so pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is where you really grow. And so maybe even just using the COVID vaccine, for example. So for those that maybe be reluctant about the COVID vaccine, ask those questions, do your research. For those that are uncomfortable maybe talking about those eating disorders or those disordered eating behaviors that they may come up, pushing yourself, getting yourself outside of your comfort zone, talking to your general practitioner or your counselor or even your friends, and just telling them that you're experiencing these kinds of behaviors, and just sharing your truth, speaking your truth, sharing your reality really goes a long way.
How did you feel? So you mentioned getting out of your comfort zone. You were a model and you completely went to the other side of the spectrum in behavioral health. And you mentioned you were going natural. Was it hard transitioning into a space, just being a Black woman, and you were going natural at the time? Was it like, how was that experience?
Oh boy, I think that definitely it was a huge transition. So when I decided to model, again, I was just kind of sought out by an agent as I was shopping for a hair conditioner. And really just went on a limb. I thought, okay, I met my parents' expectation, right, of finishing graduate school. I have my master's degree. I can check off that box. Maybe they'll be proud of me. And so now I can kind of explore me and maybe see if this is something that I'm interested in. And so I guess for me, going down that modeling kind of rabbit hole, it did bring up my own insecurities. It brought up my legs because, like I said, even at 33, that's something that still is a little bit of a voice in the back of my head, that my legs aren't good enough, that they're not toned enough. But, fortunately, there's a balance, right? So I'm not engaging in any kind of compensatory behaviors that make up for that. And so while I may not be satisfied with my legs, I'm not doing anything about it, right? At least anything unhealthy, I'll say. I will say that one thing that I've decided with myself for 2021 is to set an intention. And I say that because fortunately with my life and the way that, the world, the universe, whatever you believe, God has really allowed my life to be, it's really just had things fall into place. I can honestly say that I, didn't really need to work for my undergraduate degree, for my master's degree, for my license, for my leadership opportunity, for my husband, for my kids. It all has really just kind of fell into my lap, and I'm very blessed and very fortunate to have been afforded that kind of life. But I think on the other side, what I've really lost in this is really having that intention and really setting goals for myself and how I want myself to grow as a human. And so I've set some different goals and different intentions for me for 2021. That's really exciting. It's something that I plan on working toward, something that I plan on working for.
I love hearing you talk about setting an intention, because who cares about the fact that like everything else has seemed to have fallen in your lap? There's always something for everybody to work on. And that was a lesson I had to learn myself, as like, even the richest white girls have some insecurities or whatever it may be, right? I'm still clearly dealing with having gone to a denominant or high number of like white people at my college. I didn't go to an HBCU, so I actually am one of those people that feels like I missed out on something. Even though like I'm getting to a place of my experience was my experience, and you went through what you went through, where you went through it for a reason. I would have lost my mind at an HBCU. Disclaimer, I'm just going to throw that out there. But you might have been looking at a very different person right now.
But Lord, we're glad you went down there.
It was a good time. Let me tell you, that HBCU life is like the best experience I've ever had, especially coming from like a little girl from Fairbanks, Alaska, to join the first and the finest Black Greek sorority, and everything else that entailed with that HBCU experience is incredible. And I hope that my sons will want that experience as well.
Yes!
It is just incredible. I would move to the city if my husband would like support me.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like there just was so much life in what you just spoke. Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes, even though sometimes we might look at other people's struggle and feel like, oh, mine wasn't as much. That's a whole thing that we have to get over as well, right? Like people being like, oh, well, you didn't have it as bad. But you never know how somebody's experience, however mild or moderate or severe you might think it was, what the impact that it had on that individual. And I think there's real power in recognizing and naming that, because I think that can also sometimes be a barrier for people in seeking out mental health support. And so how have you seen maybe like women of color, or how have you yourself overcome the barrier of that stigma of Black people don't get counseling or therapy, or we don't engage in that? That's not for us.
You can pray everything away. That, and I feel
like, girl, you better speak on
it. Just put some blessed oil on it and it'll be fine. Like, no, you need to see a professional. You need medical.
Have you praying in the same circle for 20 years, using the same blessed oil from 20 years ago, and your situation has not changed? The same old jelly beans from the pulpit after Sunday.
Don't you go in on them jelly beans. Don't you go in on them jelly beans.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So we all grew up Kojic, right? Church of God in Christ. And so we know that go to the altar, give it to God. It's these demons, right? Like we can all speak that and we all can say that. But I think the reality is that that doesn't work for everyone. Right. And so it's finding people that look like you, that you can relate to. And, prior to this recording or this interview, I was on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And I saw that one of my colleagues posted the need for more BIPOCs, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, to be represented in the eating disorder community. And I thought, you know what, right here, that's me, And so I think that the need is for more African Americans, for more people of color, for more of those marginalized communities to share their story and talk about their experience and know that we are here for them, that we can relate to them, that we can normalize some of these cultural barriers, some of these things that lack within our culture, and that, we're told, from very young to keep quiet, that we're told very young to pray about, that we're told very young to bring it to God. And so while I feel that my faith is something that I very strongly believe in, I also think that God does provide and allow professionals to help us through these things. And so for me, it's very important that we reach out to that community. And with that, actually, bulimia disorder is actually one of the more prevalent disorders found in the African American community, as well as binge eating disorders. And so for me, wanting to be that face of that African American in the eating disorder circle to promote wellness and health and life and living and getting rid of these disordered eating behaviors to get to those core issues is so important to me. And it's so important to the industry. And I'm very excited to, especially with the world and with everything changing, really to be a pioneer and bringing that minority marginalized community in light, of the eating disorder community and population.
Yeah, I mean, again, I will say it again, and I'm still kind of in awe. I think this is maybe some personal work that I need to explore around like having potentially had an eating disorder. And I know that we were talking before we jumped on the call about for instance, I played basketball for 12 years, you know, when I was young, and then I went to college and played my first 2 years. And I, during that time, my sophomore year of high school, ran a 12-mile marathon. Right. And at that point, I very vividly remember not feeling like my body was good enough to be, you know, granted, I was in 10th grade and had no business wearing a tight, like pretty black dress, or, you know what I mean? But even being like in that body at that time, I didn't know how great I looked until I had put on 30 pounds, 40, 50 pounds as an adult, and could tell the difference between my high school self and my adult self. And I remember just thinking in that moment about all of the places where I was ever told that I wasn't enough, or that I needed to watch watch what I would put on my body as far as clothes, because I had thicker thighs. And at that point, I might have been a size 6 or size 8, maybe, right? And like not having just like the sphere of reference, right? Like to even like compare myself at a size 6 or size 8 with what it looked like to be at a size 14, 16, 18, 20. But just feeling like I was at a 16, 18, 20. And so I think just hearing you talk through some of that PTSD that you even personally have experienced, that I think is a lifelong journey. And we talked about episode 6 where I talked about just very blatantly fuck body shame. Like, and I know there are probably many followers for Melodie that, you know, she's very classy, and like I try to be, but when it comes to things that get me riled up, when it comes to the Hollies,
you're passionate about,
right? When in high school, when it comes to whoever you might be, to think that you have the right to comment on somebody else's physical appearance, you don't. And you do not know how far reaching your comments or your tone or your looks can negatively or even not negatively, but just have an impact on somebody down the road. You never know what your impact on a person is. And so if it comes down to commenting on the way that somebody looks, save it and keep it for yourself.
Yes.
Because individuals, powerful, intentional, radical and revolutionary women like Melodie and Courtney and myself have had to fight past stereotypes and negative ass comments imposed on us. And I will not say that any of us on this call are victims. We are relentless, and we are going to blossom and grow, and have blossomed and grown, and will be better and bigger than anything that somebody who has ever dropped a negative seed in our past, in our present, or in our future. You will never be able to impair where we are going. What is for us, and you cannot stop it. But for those of you listening who have ever felt like you have the right to comment on the way that somebody else looks, I am here to tell you, Melodie is here to tell you, with all of her certifications and degrees behind her name, put some respect on her name and what she does. You don't own the rights.
And I think it's important that, I like that you mentioned, you never know the kind of headspace that somebody is in. And I like that we have you on here talking about eating disorders, because say you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and I find that sometimes we're doing things to lose weight that are just dangerous.
Yeah.
After I had my baby, I was doing the whole fasting thing, but I was starving myself. For what? Just to lose that baby weight. And we have, women in general, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, that we have the snatch back culture. Like after you have your baby, you got to snap it back. It's like, you just had a baby, love. Like, let your body heal. You're not supposed to right away. But yet we're starving ourselves. Last week we talked about keto, and I know a lot of people are doing keto, and we had a professional say keto is dangerous. Do you find a lot of women and men are doing dangerous things and it could be considered an eating disorder?
Absolutely. And I think that, one thing that I read, there was a study in 2015, and I'll give you guys the link so that you can link the data in the research to anyone that's interested, but diets have a 98% fail rate. And so if you really think about that, is why, right? Like, I'm going to take this keto diet, right? Or I'm going to take this whatever, the new fad diet, and it has a 98% fail rate. I have a 2% of succeeding in this. Would you really do it? And is it worth the headspace, the groceries, the everything, that entails on doing this diet? And I think the answer is no. And so for me, really, it's a lifestyle change. And I really loved episode 7 that I watched. And it's a lifestyle change. It's about whole foods. Your last speaker had mentioned who prepared this. And I think that is something that's so important. Who prepared this? Was it, Costco that I just, put in my air fryer and made? Or, for example, today I made guacamole. Okay, so normally I will admit that I would buy those pre-made, guacamole little packets or this, pre-made tub, and we would eat out of that. But honestly, after I watched episode 7, I thought, you know what? Who made this? You know what? Probably Costco made this. But you know what? Today, I can say that Melodie made this. I made this guacamole. I did the avocados. I put all the seasoning, and I did low sodium and the spices.
Yes, girl!
For my kids.
Yes. Whole foods. That's all you need.
That was
whole
foods.
Diets have a 98% fail rate. And so if you even look at the diets, and maybe even if you've been on one, or if your friends have been on one, you can see that people often lose weight pretty quickly if they really, stick to it. But then what you see over time is that they gain it back, and it's not something that's sustainable. And it's something that they may even gain even more weight over time. And so really, it's really a lifestyle change. It's just making better choices, making better decisions. So I can say pretty confidently now that at 33, I'm probably thinner than I was in high school. In high school, I lived at home with my parents. My mother and my father are both from Tennessee, so we definitely had a very Southern diet, which included a lot of deep fried, a lot of, bacon fat, just crystals. Just kind of that soul food, right? But I can say now confidently that 3 years later, after having birthed 3 children, I just made better lifestyle choices. And then my body has found where it needs to be for me. And I say that because everyone isn't made to be thin, you know what I mean? Everyone is made to be how they're made genetically. And I know, Christina, you had talked about that on an episode 6, I believe, just about your family and your family of origin, and just being kind of the thickier, more Coke bottle, juicier side, right? Which is cool because that's in. Because one thing that I would like is a bigger ass. That's a whole other issue, right? But it's okay that I want a bigger ass, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm toning what I have. I am working that muscle.
That's all you need.
But again, I think that we also have to look at our genetics, right? And so everyone's not going to be Courtney, the 6 foot, thin framed, little perfect little, body, right? Like everyone's not going to be that. And so I think at the end of the day, it's being where you are genetically supposed to be and being healthy. One thing in the eating disorder community we really look at is health at every size. And it's considered the Hayes method. And that is that, you don't have to be a size 6 or a size 4 to be healthy. Sometimes people at those lower weights are even, more unhealthy than those that are maybe in the 12s, the 14s, the 16s, 18s. And so for really with the Hayes method, it's health at every size, and all food has its place. And so that's really taking the good food and the bad food mentality mind out the door, and really that all foods have their place with moderation. Because as we know, when you deprive yourself maybe from that ice cream or from that cookie or from that whatever, you just crave it that much more, and then you become miserable. And that's not healthy or healthy for anyone. So it's really finding that balance into health at every size, what is appropriate for me with my genetics, and living the best life as I can, and loving myself truly and authentically despite my weight and my shape. And that is the goal, I would say, hopefully for everyone for 2021. How can I live authentically without considering my weight and my shape?
Oh, I love
So
that,
beautiful.
Melodie. That is so powerful. To get to a place to have ascended to, right? And I don't think you ever ascend, you stop ascending, but I think even in leadership, right? As women, we are, as a leader, I think that is a part of what we do. You have a responsibility to constantly evolve. So I think about the onion, right? Like, and the different layers you are always having to unwrap, whether it's giving feedback to other people based on learning experiences, or taking feedback yourself based on those learning experiences and situations. It is about this like higher level of ascension. When I think about leadership, I always think about that. You are always responsible for being the highest level of visibility and knowledge. And even when you don't have it all, being able to figure out who in that 360-degree radius has your blind spots, and having the humility to listen to that. And so I wonder, as you have progressed as becoming a leader in your field, what has that experience been like as, I think, just a woman, a powerful Black woman? If you want to put Black woman in front of all of those, whatever you want to say, but just like that, I think, right, we bear this weight of being strong and like having this protective armor on us at all times, but then sometimes needing to let in like slivers of light and input and feedback from other people that we feel like we can trust. What has your experience been around that?
It has been a journey, to say the least. And I love that you use the onion analogy, because that's often what I use for my young clinicians, is that what we do is we unpeel the onion. And so, as you know, if you don't have an onion that's cold or that's refrigerated, there's a lot of tears, right? As you unpeel the layers, and as you get down in, there's a lot of tears, there's a lot of exploring, a lot of layers. And so I find that very similar, like you said, Christina, in leadership as well. There is a lot of onions, there's a lot of layers that you really need to kind of peel back and get to the core. And for me, it has not been an easy journey. I think that I definitely have a lot of things stacked against me. I have my age, and so I landed my first job as a clinical director when I was 30. And so I was a younger leader. I'm now, thank you. I'm now 33. So 3 years later, younger, but I feel like I'm a little older. I still have that struggle, is that I have people that are older than me that I supervise. And on top of right? And so on top of the age, I have me being a Black female, which is another thing. And then with that, there comes that microaggression, which I see constantly. It's, oh, Melodie's very direct. Or, oh, Melodie's very focused. Melodie's very, what do they say? Yeah. What do they tell me that I am? She's hard. She's tough. And a part of me is like, am I? Because I feel like that is microaggression. And I feel like a lot of that is because I am Black, and because I am assertive, because I am younger, people then assume if I'm giving a directive, forget that I'm your leader or that I'm your manager. I'm giving a directive, therefore I am a hard ass. That's what I've heard. That
yes, say it, girl.
No shit. And I'm like, I'm just following the protocol. I'm just following the guidelines for our licensure. I'm just following the guidelines from the state. I'm really not being more than a hard ass than anyone. But if you want to call me a hard ass, I mean, I guess I'll own it. I'll take it. And so that's where, right? That's where I feel like I've been the last 3 years, having been a clinical director, and really leading people, leading programs, making sure that we're accredited, making sure that we're following the state guidelines for regulatory, for accreditation standards. And so with that, there has come a lot of backlash. And that has been something, to be completely transparent, that has been something that I considered if I want to continue to do, because there comes a point for me when it's exhausting. And I'm not only a leader and a director, I'm also a mom and I'm a wife. And there was a point in my life when I thought that my work is affecting me to be, the best wife that I can be, the best parent that I can be. I don't know if it's worth it, because as African Americans, like, we can't lose. We don't have that opportunity to fail. I feel like there is kind of this sense, and maybe it's my own stuff, but like they almost want us to fail, right? And so I have to work hard to show them, to prove to them that I can do this, and here I can do it well, and I can exceed your expectation. So there's this high expectation that I have on myself. There's a high expectation for my employer. And there was a time in my life when I thought, you know what, is this worth it? Or am I losing being a mom and being a wife? And so I really had to have a conversation, really with myself, with my husband, and really trying to sort this out. What is there for me? And is this the path that I need right now? And really, when my husband and I, when we really sat down and had that conversation, my husband is probably my biggest cheerleader, 11 years strong. And he was like, no, Melodie, like, you are a leader. This is their stuff. This is not your stuff. Keep doing it. I got you. We'll get through this. Fuck the haters, kind of mentality. Like, fuck them, like, I posted on Instagram a few days ago this post that I saw from Denzel, and it was something like, if your spirit irritates people, it's their demons, not yours. And that was something that really resonated with me, because, I think not only as a model, because when people look at me, they automatically make assumptions about my appearance and how I got where I am, maybe because of where I look, despite my resume. Because I have a damn good resume. I will brag about my resume, because I did the grind, okay? Yes. So in 2008, I did the in-home counseling, where I worked for a company, a very large company in Mississippi, in Tennessee, and I worked with the lower socioeconomic status population, and I went to their house and I provided counseling, and I did the grind. I did the work to get where I am today, and I started in 2008, and you cannot take that away from me. And I think that that's so powerful, and that's how I am at 30 years old, a director, because I did the steps that I need to get where I am. And again, full support from my husband when I was kind of debating whether or not I wanted to stay in leadership, because again, a lot of haters, just a lot of just mean people along the way. Is this worth my mental health? Is this worth it?
Yes.
The answer was yes. And fortunately, I found a boutique mental health facility in North Phoenix that really meets my needs professionally, personally, and it really does work for me. But I know, one thing that you guys spoke about in some of your previous podcasts was just with COVID showing that, the one thing that's good about COVID is that it's shown people maybe this sense of entrepreneurship. It's kind of sparked this kind of generational wealth, right? Like within people. And I definitely have the bug. And so stay tuned. Maybe that's going to be another conversation, but I'm feeling that in 2021. I'm manifesting it. I have full support of my husband. And so I'm really excited again about setting an intention. And this is something that I've never had to do before. Like I said, with the modeling, did high fashion runway, did some pretty big jobs with some Grammy Award winners for music videos, did some high fashion designers, did some book covers, did some like national commercials, did a lot of really fun stuff. But I can say that I didn't work for that. It was just time and place and opportunity. And so I'm really excited for 2021 for me to work toward something and to see what happens.
Beautiful. Melodie, we have truly enjoyed talking to you. One thing that I really took from our conversation is, you're showing up for everybody, show up for yourself and the things that are important to you. I love that you keep mentioning, I talked to my husband, we met together and we decided what's going to be best for our family. So I love that. And you're definitely always welcome back on the Shiforia podcast. Where can people find you if they have any questions?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's MF Simmons, and I think is my handle. Instagram is pretty much my public page. My Facebook is pretty private. I mean, granted, I'm really not active on either. And typically what I share on my Instagram, I share on my Facebook. But stay tuned because, once I blossom in 2021, I will definitely be posting those links to those other pages that I want you guys to follow, because I'm really excited about, just more to come with eating disorders, the African American community, just overall wellness and health of the African American community. And I'm very excited to where 2020 will take me and my vision. So stay tuned.
Oh, I love that.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, Melodie. Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you for all the nuggets and stuff that you gave us.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, I've been a fan since you guys launched. It's been really cool to see you guys. Like the babies, even though we're really not that far apart in age, it's been really cool. I've always just viewed you guys as the littles, and so it's really cool to see you guys do it in big and making it your own. And so I'm very humbled and very appreciative to just share this space with you. So thank you guys.
Yes, the littles of Lily of the Valley. That's what.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Melodie. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, that was wonderful. I enjoyed myself. What about you?
Girl, I feel like I have a whole new level of inspiration to go into this year.
Yes.
I feel like she just named a lot of the things that I named for my mission and vision. Somebody asked me a question and they were like, if you died tomorrow, what would people know you for?
Yeah.
And I had to honestly answer, not as, I wouldn't want people to know me as an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard for me to answer because that's what I've been. That's what I went to school for. That's what I worked for my master's for. That's what I do every day. That is my job.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that's what I was put on this earth to do. And if I may, I wrote it down, and I'll just have to say I did write it down. I'm only day 2 into this year. And I just want to share my mission, because if I died tomorrow, I would want people to know that my mission is that I inspire women to radically and rebelliously chase down revolutionary feminine freedom.
I love that.
If you never did another thing, we have been put into so many boxes of who we should be or how we should act. You don't get to fucking tell us that shit anymore.
Girl.
Because when we get in circles like what we were in tonight,
yeah,
we don't need.
Well, wait. Time out. Let me stop you before you get fired up and you have to save this for next episode. Nope.
Okay,
let me stop you. Thank you guys. Follow us on Instagram, Shiforia. Send us an email, shiforiapodcast@gmail.com. Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, Google Play. We'll be there. Thank you guys. Love you.